Good morning, everybody. It's David Gray here. I just wanted to take a couple minutes and share with you a thought I recently had when I was reading a passage out of Exodus chapter 4. The Bible says this: Then Moses answered and said to God, But suppose they do not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, The Lord has not appeared to you. And so the Lord said to Moses, What is that in your hand? And Moses said, It's a rod. Now, I want to tell you in this story, Moses was about 80 years old, and really he was just minding his own business. He was on the backside of the desert taking care of his sheep. And he gets a divine interruption from God. God starts to speak to him out of a burning bush. The bush is burning, but it's not consumed. And as Moses started to approach the bush to see what it was, God started to speak to him. And God gave him a pretty powerful instruction. He said, I want you to go back to Egypt, and I want you to lead the Israelites out of the slavery and the bondage of the Egyptians. And so Moses, instead of being instantly in shock and awe and in instant obedience to God's instructions, after all, he spoke to him out of a burning bush. Crazy. But instead of that, Moses starts to make excuses. And what he did was he started to talk about the things he did not have. So he starts to say, maybe they won't believe me. Maybe they don't know who I am. They don't respect me. They have no reason to listen to me. They haven't seen me for at least 40 years. And then he starts later in another passage, he starts to talk about how he doesn't speak well, and many people believe he stuttered. And so he starts to make all these excuses, and he starts to talk about the things that he does not have. And to me, that is so much like so many of us. When we think about being successful, when we think about accomplishing something for God, when we think about doing something positive, what our tendency is to focus on the things we do not have. Maybe we don't have enough money, or we're not educated enough, or we think we don't have any talents, or we don't speak well, or we don't have a position of prestige or a position of respect. But can I tell you something today? God is never focused on what we don't have. What God is focused on is what we do have. So when Moses starts to make these excuses and starts to justify why he can't really do what God has called him to do, God asks him this simple question. He says, what's that in your hand? What do you currently have? And Moses said, well, it's a rod. Now the rod was the stick that Moses used to take care of the sheep. It was his shepherd's staff. And so all it was something very common, very ordinary. But here's the thing about God. God has a habit of taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary. God likes to take the common things and make them uncommon. God likes to use natural things and make them supernatural. But that only happens when we submit them to Him. And so the thought I have for you this morning is, what's in your hand? See, this is a pattern with God. I want you to think about this. David had 5 smooth stones, but when he submitted them to God, it only took 1 stone to kill Goliath, the giant who was intimidating the entire army of Israel. The widow at Zarephath only had enough corn for 1 meal. But when she submitted it to God, she was able to feed not only her, but her entire household and the prophet who lived in her home for all of the years of the famine. What about the little boy who had the sack lunch when they went to hear Jesus preaching? And suddenly the disciples realized that everybody was hungry. All he had was a couple fish and a few loaves of bread. But when he gave them over to Jesus, he was able to feed over 5,000 people. So the question is, what is in your hand? What do you have right now that if you will simply, merely submit it to God, God can use it for His kingdom and for His glory? My question to you is, or my challenge to you is, stop waiting. Stop waiting until you're prepared enough. Stop waiting until you're trained enough. Stop waiting until you have enough money. Stop waiting until you feel motivated. Stop waiting until you have the right job or you meet the right person. I'm telling you this morning, and I know this sounds preachy, and I don't mean to sound preachy. I really just want to encourage you and challenge you. What is in your hand? What gift, what ability, what skill? Maybe it's simply compassion. Maybe it's giving. Do you know there's people everywhere around us that just need a listening ear? What is in your hand? I'm going to tell you, when you take whatever it is that you have now and you submit it to God and you say to God, God, this is all I have. This is all I have. This one little thing is all I have, but I'm giving it to you and I'm asking you to help me use it for your kingdom. I'm telling you that God can take that and use it in a way that you could not even imagine. This is his habit. This is why Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, God takes the foolish things of the world and he uses them to confound the wise. And so my question to you today is, what's in your hand? Have a great day.